Hi guys, Acesup here. Thought I'd bring you some endgame action and good timing. We've got the Ace King here. This is an afternoon session. It's on Sunday in Japan, which is probably Saturday night for most people around the world. And so I started registering around the time of the PokerStars Big 160, sorry, not the Big 162, the Nightly 162. I think it's a 40k guaranteed tourney, and just selected a few tourneys from Stars and from Triple Eight, and they have just been incredibly soft. Of course, the buy-ins are pretty small, the prize pools are not big, and that's the case here. But I really have been able to just coast my way to the cusp of the final tables here. Actually, 3 of 12 and 6 of 12. And the play, I mean, I've been able to get in some really profitable situations. And I think that's just one of the good things about playing this afternoon session is just the lower variance. You don't have to invest as much. You won't get the big returns, the big paydays, but you'll certainly get a very consistent profit from playing this time. And I think that the table on the right has been the tighter table. The PokerStars table is, it's got some weaker sort of recreational type opponents, but I think in general the players are not doing anything too crazy. But we do have on the left side table a little bit more action, and the players are doing some pretty odd things. So let's just see if we can catch some of that happening. Of course, the 10-jack offsuit on the button, I go ahead and raise. The big blind has been defending pretty tight. And I've just stolen his blind a couple of times. He hasn't really contested yet. So we're going to go ahead and keep doing it. We have a decent stack, but I mean, in terms of, if he defends, we still have a little bit of post-flop playability. But of course, we are in that sort of precarious spot where a 3-bet can get a lot of leverage against us here. And he might just decide now with the big blind sitting out as well that he's kind of had enough. I was hoping he might 3-bet there actually, because to be honest, I would have got it in. We're in the, the second pivot with M12. And I think that it's a size where players generally will attack with a reasonable frequency because they know they can get a lot of leverage from this stack with a 3-bet. It's very hard for us to continue, and normally we'll be forced to jam or fold. Pretty close here with the ace-deuce, because these guys are really, really short. And actually, I will open here. They're very tight, well, particularly the button player. And 79. I mean, if he does jam, I probably can't quite fold. But I just think because it's UTG and he's been tight, I normally don't consider folding, obviously, at this stack size. But, I don't want to make that a sure thing. There certainly could be times when you might want to against tight ranges. I'm just actually kind of plugging a range in for him here. Just trying to get a feel for what to do. It's probably jamming something like that, I guess. And obviously we only have 30 chips in equity, but the price would have been pretty big. This guy's gone ahead and from small blind and 3-bets, so I think laying it down seems to make the most sense. I know it's only 6-handed, so when I say UTG, it's not a full, obviously not as significant as a full ring open from UTG. But I just don't see this player messing around too much here. I haven't really noticed him doing anything out of line. And just going back to what I was saying, I'll just open up the calc and see what sort of odds we were getting if it had been a jam from the short stack. It's a close one, isn't it? Yeah, I think I'm going to fold it. It's a little bit weak. He only has M9 just under, so I think that hand's a little bit too weak. Going to get us in a bit of trouble. We're not going to flop big enough often enough, and we don't really have stacks deep enough to to be able to wield much of a skill edge. We did have position, obviously, but remember, the shorter the stacks, generally, the more significant that is for the player out of position, because there's more depth of stack gives the player in position a bigger advantage. I'm going to open here, just because this player's been kind of tight. We don't have a big sample. But, it is also the final table bubble, so it's only a $5 rebuy, but, I mean, it's significant to some players. There's a couple of K up top almost, so, yeah, I mean, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 18, 27, 36, M3.5. M3.5. Wow, I'm right on with this one. I think M3.5. I just don't... So it just really depends if this player understands jamming ranges, doesn't it? I mean, if he understands jamming ranges, it's an easy isolation. But if he doesn't, he's not jamming, Jack 8 suited, Jack 9, 10 suited and stuff like that, or worse. 7, 8, 9, 18, 27, 36. It's a really close spot. I think I'm going to fold. I think mathematically it's a call. But the reason why I'm folding is because, I mean, against this player's range, I think it's a call. But we do have just over M10 and 2 players behind. And we also have a stack where losing M4 does kind of cripple us a bit. I mean, we'll go down to sort of M7. Blinds are up in 1 minute. We'll be all of a sudden sort of M6, M5. So it's actually kind of a significant pot, even though it only seems like an M3.5 jam. So it's kind of a tight fold. But for those reasons, I'm just going to refrain from making that call there. Just maintain the M11 stack. Just play with a little bit of, just with stack preservation in mind. I'm just going to make kind of a tight fold there, I think. But, I don't know this player's... I've got him marked as sort of being a recreational player that's probably terrible. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's jamming wildly. I mean, players can sometimes be terrible because they don't jam enough when they're short, and they just wait for very tight hands and get blinded out. And you see them folding, in the big blind with like M, 1.5, and they're still folding, and, that's terrible. But they're playing tight, so... but time will tell. We'll probably see him open up something soon. But I have him noted that he 3-bet with a pretty short stack with King Jack, which seemed bad. So, yeah, not a super helpful note since we don't know the circumstances. But it sounds like, it was kind of like a early or mid position open, and he just decided to get it in with King Jack off. Kind of a close one here, and that makes it a bit easier for us. He's jamming a lot now, isn't he? So I'm actually wishing we took the Ace-4 now. Could have had, King 8s and stuff, 7, 9 suiteds. It's looking more like he's, I wouldn't say understands jam ranges necessarily, but is certainly willing to get his stack in, as he should be with this stack size. The other thing is too, is that it's a final table bubble again, so, I don't know if he's going to go crazy, but it certainly looks like he might be. So just going back to what we were saying before about that Ace-2 open, it was kind of a borderline one. We had the blocker, of course. Let's just go back and have a look at that. And so once we raise to 8, if the player on the button jams for 27, let's say, it's going to be 19 to call. And so it'll be 19 divided by the total pot, which will be... I'm just going to pull out a second calculator because I'm... Well, it's because I'm lazy, really. So, what do we got here? So he's got 27. We said we're going to say 27 times 2 because it's our stack as well, plus blinds and antes. Plus 9 is 63. A7, I'm going to make them in here. Yeah, so we would have needed 30% equity, and we had 32.7, so it would have been a call, which is, normally the case, obviously. Presuming he's jamming this range here, which, well, I think he is. But, he might not be. I'm going to try it again now. It's a little bit better this time, I think. It's kind of tough here, because this guy's been 3-betting a lot on the left. And so he's only M7. And it's only 6-handed. I think ace-8 suited I would call, and ace-9 off up I would call, but I think ace-7's... It's probably just right there where, again, it's probably not quite... I think it'd be very close mathematically against an M7, well, just under M7 jam from the big blind there, since he seems to be aggressive from what we can see. But at the same time, I just think that we've got a pretty good stack here, and we don't need to take too many risks right now. I think that we can get a lot of leverage and find some pretty good spots, because it is a bit of a monkey table, to be honest. I've seen some pretty odd things. Kind of tight, this guy. He's been kind of tight. I won't go through my HUD stats, guys, but yeah, I mean, this is like where I have my early open here is I won't go through all of it, but just to give you an idea of the opening range, opening early position 14, middle 18, and late 14, so, not surprising he had queens. And I would have given him a little bit more respect, I think, just raising with that short stack size too. Less likely to be a wide, marginal hand. So you just see sort of all the endgame concepts here coming together, the player types, stack sizes, the positions, of course. And really, it's that fine line, isn't it, where we've made a couple of kind of close, almost tight folds. The ace-4 is the one that stands out, of course. And I think that's a very fine line between, shutting down and getting yourself in a sort of that situation where you're playing a little bit too tight, which is, something that you don't want to do, because you want to, as you've heard me talk about, control your own destiny, so to speak. So you can doing that we do that by being aggressive, don't we? We don't want to rely on winning flips, and that's why maintaining aggression in these late stages is very critical. And so I don't want to get into a habit of folding too much or getting pushed around. But at the same time, we do want to just give ourselves that little buffer with our stack size where we're in a pretty good position. Probably on the right table, it's a little bit closer. It's a little bit more sort of... he has been folding a bit from the small blind, that guy, which is interesting to note too. But yeah, as I was saying, it's a little bit more of a precarious situation where we've just got that stack size where we could be we could be short soon and have to take some sort of marginal spot. So it's a little bit different from the left where we have M20 because a little bit more pressure on us. So we can't really wield the same sort of deep stack and wait for some sort of ideal situation. Not that we're going to be doing that on the left table, but you guys know what I mean. We can afford to not do anything too risky on the left right now. I think I'm just going to fold on the right here. If you got the big stack, as this guy got skills 08 has got on the right, I mean, he can really he can get pretty abusive at this sort of stage where there's a lot of stacks, here, where he can really put pressure on. Obviously, this player here is so short that he can't really put pressure on in the sense that they're just going to commit with anything, and they had jacks, so obviously that was That was pretty standard, but it was interesting to see that the player got in the king 2. Not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think. I think I'm going to just take the aggressive route here and raise this up, just because this player has been, just snuck that one, and this player has been pretty active in their cutoff. Just snuck that raise in, didn't I? It's last second, popped out. You kind of get a little bit of hang time in on 888. You don't get that on stars. When it says, when it gets to 0, it's 0. But sort of the referee on 888 poker, like it's a basketball game or something, just, you know, he gives you, doesn't call the clock straight away, he just gives you that extra couple of seconds to release a jump shot, which I find very handy. And it was handy then. And Pocket Jacks is pretty handy now. I guess I would just min. You know, I think we want to try and give this guy the impression that he might have fold equity. If we raise too large, it's going to cut that down. Obviously a good spot. And, you know, this is just kind of what I'm talking about. You know, we get a pretty good 3-bet with against a player we know is opening wide with pocket 5s. We pick up, you know, that dead money. And then we get jacks. And, you know, we're obviously lucky that big blind had ace jack. But even if we lost, you know, it wasn't a huge sort of, it wouldn't cripple us. And we're just really kind of bobbing and weaving and just leveraging, putting pressure on and just getting involved when we can. I think because we saw the player on the right open king 2 off, I think I am just going to shove here. It's a little bit risky, but we can see he's been very loose. And we don't really want to be the next to bust, that's for sure. But I just think if we're calling here, you know, this is kind of what I was just talking about with the saying that we might have to, I mean, not take a risk. I mean, it is a small risk, but this is what I was just talking about, how we might have to expose ourselves to a more marginal situation. Because, you know, we're kind of deep there. Not deep, but, you know, for a 3-bet jam against a somewhat early position opener, you know, pocket 8s is never a fist pump. But you know, we're just trying to get that timing, and it just seemed against a player who's looks like he's, you know, doing what he should be doing and opening quite a bit and trying to abuse the table. It just seemed, you know, we saw him open king 2, and it says here he's opening 28% from early, 40 from mid, 71% as a steal. Only 165 hands of history, but you know, we just get the feeling he's quite loose. Which made the pocket 8s an easier jam. And we just have to hope that we're not wrong, because we don't really want to bust in 9th, that's for sure. Not when we're in 4th position. And his calling range is going to be pretty tight because of that. I think he's going to give us more credit, well, a lot of credit, given the final table dynamic. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about in endgame when I say you can't just wait. You know, we could just call there and play it safe, you know, try and get a safe board or see what he does on the flop and so forth. But I think that you're kind of just playing, I mean, you're just playing to move up in the money when you've really, in reality, got a pretty good spot to pick up a nice pot. And if he does happen to have ace king, ace queen, and calls, you know, we go up to 2nd position and put ourselves in a pretty good spot. Well, actually, I guess we would have been in 1st position because we would have been against the chip leader, so he would have gone down and we would have gone up. And so just trying to find that sort of balance. Hey, Dal, I'm just doing a little recording. I'll call you back. Say Dal, bye. Pocket aces, we've just woken up with the pocket aces here. Yeah, go ahead and min, I guess. No point in getting a little whack here and trying anything too funky. And not surprisingly, everyone just folds pretty quickly. Final table, UTG open, pretty good, you know, stack sizes to be opening on. Lots of sort of 7, 5, 7, 11, 11, 6, 15. So, I mean, just unfortunate that no one woke up with anything big. But, we're in a pretty good spot there. Would have been good, obviously, to get a bigger pot there, but we're in third. Just a matter of caressing the situation here. I'm going to fold here. It's kind of close. This guy's stealing a lot. I think that he'd be opening there a ton of hands, just trying to use his stack on the final table. But, I think that we're not... I probably would be more inclined to open if we had closer to M sort of 12, where we get a little bit more leverage, where we kind of look like we're more willing to play for stacks, rather than having a stack depth where he might call in position, or he might 4-bet us. It's kind of an interesting, if we get jammed on the right there, what we would do. I probably would have folded, to be honest, and hated it. But I just don't think they're jamming much wider. Ace 10. When it's final table with 9 left against an early position open, I just don't really see that happening. So we'd be hoping for like a flip against Ace 8 and so forth. Unless, obviously if it's some sort of loose opponent, that we've noticed is a bit of a monkey, then it's different, but not really the case. I am going to call here, actually. I think it's been limped early, and the two big stacks are in, and we've got a connector that can, potentially give us a chance to win a huge pot if we happen to flop big. Do it! One time. Yeah, pity the queen is not an 8 or a 4, but maybe a chance to get a free card here and get the 4 of clubs on the turn. I'm not going to bet here, obviously, with 5 players in behind. If it checked to me, I'd be a bit suicidal, especially against these guys. Although, it should look very strong. It should look like we have a queen, or, at least like a jack-queen type hand, I guess. Queen 10. High pressure, so going to fold the jack 5. Deep stacks, mid-stage, I would call. Well, not deep stacks, but, some depth. There's a lot of the times when you say deep stacks, I mean, like, on the left, we're like third in chips, over 500,000. But, we've only got M18, so it can all potentially be over pretty quick. Touch wood, that doesn't happen. It's a good stack for the table. The Q, well, the average stack, is 482,000. So, we've got a little bit above average, but I think I will raise here. This guy will get good leverage against. These guys could 3-bet us. This guy's been kind of tight in the very small sample we have, and he did just limp UTG, so, I mean, he could be, I guess that doesn't say too much, maybe he's loose, but it could just be a mixed bag in terms of his style. Very hard to say. I mean, I guess we could maybe surmise that he might be on the loose side. Obviously, it's a really bad flop, so I'm just going to make the very small, well, fairly small C-bet, just because it doesn't have to work very often. And I think that just because he did limp before, and we only min-raised, I think that he's got a lot of hands that, I mean, he's probably got a lot of small, like small suited connectors, or just suited cards, connected cards, and so forth. So I think that, he could have their sort of 5-7 suited, and maybe a 4-5 suited, or like a, sort of hand like we have, I guess. But I can't imagine he would fold a pair. If we get lucky, he might fold like a jack 8, I guess, suited, where he had a gutser, which is good. So I think between the chance of him I think between the chance of him folding a hand that's better than ours, and also just to keep the hand a little bit cleaner, because if we check back and the turn gives him a pair, he might do, or a flush draw or something, he might stab, or he might get sticky, or, you know, it's just sort of a one and done bet here, which I think just keeps it simple, one and done. So I think it's a profitable bet, and may even just be the most profitable, you know, from that point of the flop on, the most profitable way to proceed, I would think, against a player like that anyway. It's actually good, quite a good return on investment here on the left if we can finish up the top. Had, I think, just the one rebuy and add-on, did I? May have had an extra rebuy. May have had one or two extra rebuys. But yeah, probably only in for $20 or so. 1,822 up top. And table seems to have everyone just seems to be perhaps being a little bit careful now. Haven't seen any of the madness that I mentioned there could be. It's pretty normal, I guess, when a final table starts out, though, isn't it? Other than the odd big stack here, like we see. We did see this player to our left before. I didn't mention it, actually, when I saw it. You guys probably noticed. GDMP. He just opened before some sort of massive raise size. 55,000, I think it was. So that's always a good sign when you see a guy opening for, you know, what's that, like four times. Four times the big blind. And the limping, of course. I mean, that's that's good to see. We got Noah, the big stack. Although, you know, I probably prefer he was raising. You know, I prefer he was putting pressure on, I think. I'd rather he was collecting, you know, all the chips himself. And busting players, sort of thing. Or at least crippling them, just sort of chipping away at them, so to speak. Because I just think for us, in terms of tournament EV, it's better. And obviously pocket aces on the right here is pretty good for tournament EV. And it's a nice little pot. It's kind of like what I was saying before, isn't it? Where players are not going to get too out of line against an early position open. I just don't know. You know, I should. It's weird to say it. You know, I don't know why. I mean, I've seen it happen before, but I just love the way we get to miss the big blind here. I mean, we go from UTG to small blind. And, of course, get the ace-king to boot. But yeah, we're UTG, and then we just get to jump across to the small blind because the player next on the button's going to bust. So, I mean, they don't do dead buttons on stars, but I mean... Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's freaking me out, but... yeah, it must be because my roots are playing live poker, so... I used to always see the dead buttons from time to time anyway. And Bino gives us a bit of an advantage, doesn't it? Just getting to bail out on the big blind.